What's up? What's happening from Radio Row in Las Vegas? If you are watching us on YouTube, you see we got a guest already here. It's Robert Mays from The Athletic. And Robert, I have to say, whenever we play our little hour openers and there's a guest and I can see their reaction, it's either the favorite part of my day or the least favorite. That one's kind of goofy, but it is our show. So welcome and thanks for being our first guest here on Radio Row.
I'm happy to be here. I always am. It's always great to chat with you.
And unlike, it's funny because this is the land of skits and bits. It is sports radio, and especially no more than this year, because it is sports radio meets Las Vegas. And what more skits and bits combination is there in sports media than if Radio Row at the Super Bowl was in Las Vegas? But I actually want to talk football with you. Like, does that mean like we have to put up a wall? Like, is this an island, an oasis over here?
It is this week always, if you're in this business and you're in the content world, which we all are now, it's impossible to escape am I doing enough? Am I doing the right stuff? What should I be doing? Should I be doing that?
Right.
And I always try to insulate myself as much as possible because all we really want to do on our show for the most part is talk about football.
Right.
So I'm happy to do that at any stage.
Yeah, of course, Robert is the host of the Athletic Football Show. Very, very good podcast, all things NFL, and is good at breakdowns if you read his work at The Athletic as well. We'll talk about the Commanders in a second. Who's like the best conversation you guys have had so far this week? Who's been your favorite or one that you're looking forward to?
We've really been doing most of our shows so far. So Nate's going to be doing some film breakdowns with a bunch of players over like the next 2 days.
Okay.
I always feel like that's a really good way to get the most out of that 10 to 15 minutes that guys are going to give you. Just because they're instantly explaining something to you. You can learn a little bit, kind of turns them on right away. So we're going to be getting some really good guys just to be breaking down kind of one or two plays from their season on our YouTube channel over the next 2 or 3 days.
Nice. So definitely check that out. And Nate, if you don't know, Robert's co-host Nate Tice, who has a great view of the quarterback position, especially because that is his former gig. All right. So this is the question I'm probably going to ask the most this week, but what do you make of the Dan Quinn hire? And then we can branch off into Cliff and into Peters, how it all works, the setup. But Quinn to Washington, how do you grade that hire?
If they weren't going to get the two guys that they seemingly wanted before Dan Quinn, I understand landing on Dan Quinn, right? This is a safe choice. This is a reliable choice. It's a guy who has done this before. I think the floor with a Dan Quinn hire is fairly high. And if you're going to miss out on the potential high upside swings of a Ben Johnson, of a Mike McDonald, these unknowns but younger guys who theoretically have a really big upside, then landing on Dan Quinn is okay, we have an adult in the room. This is a solid place to start. I understand how they got there.
I should also mention, before my boss murders me, that Dan Quinn is actually joining us in 40 minutes. So Dan Quinn is calling into the show. He's not here in Las Vegas, but Dan Quinn is on the show today at 4:45. So make sure that you are tuned in. Tell your friends. Get the free Odyssey app. Hey, download that so they can listen. Stream us on YouTube. Listen to us as they drive around. Take an extra lap around the Beltway. Whatever you got to do. Dan Quinn at 4:45. I agree with you on that, but I do wonder about Quinn's ceiling because we talk about so much of the floor with these veteran coaches, but we've seen the retread, if you will, guys in their second stint that it can go as high as you can go for. Like Pete Carroll in his second stint won a Super Bowl. Yeah. Dan Quinn was there for it. Belichick was not the first, that wasn't his first go around in New England, and it's the best coaching run that anyone's ever had. So the idea that it is, just because we don't know means there's a higher ceiling is I don't necessarily think it's wrong, but I do think it is something that sometimes we ignore. What does Dan have to do differently this time around in your mind to make sure that he can have a Carroll-esque run where the ceiling is higher than anyone thought?
Well, if you look at a Pete Carroll, and the reason that I think that worked out so well the second time around, you have an influx of generation-changing talent.
Yes.
If you look at those drafts, that 2010, 2011, 2012 stretch that Seattle had, they had better players than everybody else, and that's a really good place to start. And also, there was a schematic advantage created by the introduction of that kind of Hawk cover 3 defense that took over the league for 10 years. So it was a very different Pete Carroll because of the players that he was trotting out and because of the newer sort of stuff that they had from a schematic X's and O's point of view. I think Dan Quinn's not going to kind of jump us with anything schematically here. We've watched him be a defensive coordinator again in Dallas for the last couple of years. I think we kind of understand what Dan Quinn is. So I think the reasons that this could be better the second time around are a little bit more flexibility within that defensive system. When they were in Atlanta, it was still a lot of that tried and true Seattle principles. There was a lot of single high defense, a lot of man, a lot of cover 3, and it was inflexible at times. In Dallas, they introduced some a few more counter punches, a few newer kind of elements of what they wanted to be, and I think they had more answers than they would have when Dan was in Atlanta. At the end still, though, we saw it get a little bit stagnant, a little bit predictable. So I think that's going to be a huge consideration is how do they stay one step ahead with objectively worse players in Washington than they had in Dallas. And on the other side of it, one of the reasons Dan had success in Atlanta, he got the play call right. And that is going to be the question for any defensive-minded or CEO-type head coach. Did you get the guy that's calling plays for your offense that can be a true difference maker at that spot?
Okay, so we just opened up a couple of cans, and I swear to God, because I said I'm not going to do bits. This is not a bit. I just got a text from Commander's PR. It looks like Quinn's going to be 5:15. He was floating between the two times. 4:45 is what we thought. Looks like Dan Quinn at 5:15 today. So all those friends you just told, tell them 30 minutes later, Dan Quinn at 5:15. So I had one of those. I don't know that KJ Wright was a generational guy, but he was Pro Bowler.
Hugely important to what that defense was.
Totally. Had him on the show when they hired DQ, and he said he would have told DQ, I want you to be the play caller, because he had such a good feel for that. There's going to be a lot of talk about Cliff, and I want to talk to you about Cliff in a second. But when we talk about that schematic advantage, one area where I feel like a lot of head coaches handicap themselves is you get the job because you're a great coordinator. Dan Quinn is one of the great defensive coordinators in the last 25 years in the NFL. I would hope that he is heavily involved on the defensive side of the ball, even if he's got head coach stuff to do. So I guess that is like a sentiment. I guess I'd like your reaction to that sentiment, and then I can go into
I understand that. I think that's why a lot of these guys did get the job. I also feel like it's important as a head coach to make sure that you're present in all areas. You're setting what the building feels like. And I think that the best thing that Dan can bring as a head coach, period, is energy. Yeah. It is a feeling of what is it like going to work? Are you excited to be there? I've started to really buy into that. When you talk to players around the league, when you talk to assistant coaches around the league, that being the vibe in the building, that being just the overall feeling that your staff has, the roster has, that's important. That matters. And I do think that is where Dan Quinn shines, even compared to other people calling defensive plays.
For sure. All right, Robert Mays from The Athletic is with us. So on the defensive side, I definitely agree with you that in Atlanta it got stale at the end. And I think Dan knew it. Talking to Logan Paulson, my co-host on my podcast, who was there for part of that run, the word that Logan used was like he was itching. Like he knew something had to change and he couldn't quite figure out fast enough to make it actually happen. As someone who studies the schematics of this as much as anybody in our business, where do you think that next step is, where offenses are starting to evolve, the run game is starting to come back in vogue a little bit? What's the next step for defenses from hawk cover 3 to kind of these Fangio, different things, some of the zone match principles that have become in vogue that make reading coverage damn near impossible? What's the next defensive adjustment to this stuff, and how do you think a guy like Quinn and some of the principles that he instills matches up with where the game is going?
I think it's a few different things. I would say flexibility in all areas. So if you look at, in my opinion, the best defenses in the NFL this year, let's talk about Baltimore and maybe Kansas City. The Ravens or the Chiefs could be a different front, play-to-play, game-to-game. Sometimes it's a four-man front. Sometimes it's a five-down front. You have no idea what you're going to get depending on the situation because their personnel can do both. I think that's hugely important on the front end. On the back end, you have these defenses that are the best defenses in the league. It's Rolodex coverages. You have no idea what you're going to get. I was looking at the numbers today. The Chiefs played the least amount of cover 3 in the NFL this year, by a lot. And you really don't have any idea what they're going to trot out there depending on down distance situation. I think that unpredictability is very important. I think the last part of it is, how are you going to bring pressure without putting yourself in a bad spot? So a lot of these simulated pressures that these defenses are using where they're going to bring 4, you have no idea which 4 it's going to be. So you can be sound on the back end while unpredictable with the amount of guys you're bringing at the quarterback. So I think it's just about making sure that you have soundness, but an offense can't get a beat on exactly what they're going to be getting down in and down out. And when you look at when you look at Dallas, that's not what they were. They really leaned on the level of talent that they had on that defense, and they leaned on the pass rush getting home and those corners really being able to play top down, really sit on some stuff. They played a ton of man coverage. They played nickel to pretty much everything. So I'm curious to see if, with a step back in the talent level he has on defense in Washington, do we see a little bit more creativity, a little bit more diversity of ideas coming from him and that staff?
I also wonder and I know that especially on the defensive side of the ball, there's no personnel that's guaranteed to be there long term. So they could completely rehaul this roster in 2 years, if not mostly rehaul it this year. But to start, he's got Allen and Payne up the middle, and he's got Jamin. that is so much a thicker spine than he had in Dallas. So I'm very curious to see what he and Joe Witt, and we'll see who else comes to fill out that staff. I'm curious to see how he applies some of the principles to that personnel, because I think there's a lot of potential there. Like, if there's looking for speed and explosiveness, like for position, Deron Payne's speed and power for position is elite. Jamin's speed and power is elite. His play recognition and some other stuff is, that area to be desired. But that's not me saying like, oh, this is going to work. I'm 100% confident. Like, I have no idea, but I'm really excited to see what he does.
I really appreciated how much Dan got fired really early during his last year in Atlanta. I think it was like 5 weeks into the season.
Yeah, 5.
So he had a ton of time to kind of sit back and say, okay, what do I want to be? Where were the holes? Where were some of the weaknesses? How could we maybe take this to the next stage of what type of defense we have to play to kind of keep pace? And I wonder what sort of introspective kind of look in the mirror conversations happen this offseason now that he's coming into another reset point, if that makes sense.
Totally. Robert Mace, the Athletic Football Show, with us here on the Hoffman Show. We're live on Radio Row in Las Vegas. Again, 1 hour from now, Dan Quinn will join us live. Cliff Kingsbury, what do you make of that hire and what it seems to be the NFL's infatuation with him, even though the results have been very mixed, not only in Arizona, but at Texas Tech, where people kind of love to throw out he had Mahomes, but he failed anyway line.
It's always funny to me which offensive coordinators are the hot names in these cycles. And I think that sometimes it's as simple as, well, he was a head coach. He was a head coach, and now he can be our offensive coordinator. Isn't that great? And sometimes it feels like that's as simple as the conversation is. And that kind of feels like what's happening with Cliff Kingsbury right now, where you look at the pool of coordinators, it had gotten a little bit shallow deeper into the process. Who's left around? Oh, a guy who was a head coach for multiple years in the NFL. Let's go do that. So I don't know if it's any more complicated than that being the process with landing on a guy like Cliff.
I saw you check your watch, and I hate to do this on the air. Are you okay on time? Okay.
You're fine, yeah.
The nature of Radio Row is it's a zoo, and everyone's got somewhere to be, and so I just want to make sure that I'm not messing you up.
My time is yours, my friend.
All right, well, Dan Quinn's not on until 5:15 now, so saddle up, my friend. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that to you. So I think with Quinn, with Cliff, it's interesting to hear what Quinn said on Monday in the press conference, which is basically, that guy gave me fits. I hated playing him, and so he's been on my radar. What is it about that offense that, when it was working for Arizona, worked, and then why did defenses figure it out seemingly every year and shut it down in the back half of the year?
Because it's different. It's very weird. It's unique in the NFL space when you have all of the lighter personnel that they were trotting out, all of the spread formations that they were using. I mean, it's a spread offense in the NFL, and I think that was the biggest difference, is that like any team that's separate from the pack, when you have to prepare for them, you don't have a lot of other things to go on. This is a unique challenge compared to the teams that you're playing week in and week out. But I think that ultimately, when you get deeper into the season and more teams have tape on it and understand what the tendencies are, understand what the weaknesses are, that's why I think you've seen in the back half of the season them kind of take a slide, because the novelty of it all starts to wear off and defenses end up catching up.
Yeah, I know the tempo is a big thing too. It's like, okay, well, this is novel. What coverage do you have to play? And it takes you don't figure it out. Well, someone figures it out, and then all of a sudden you know what coverage to play. The tempo doesn't matter, and you're just left with a simple offense, which has its pluses and minuses as well. Simplicity can be good or be bad. When you see them hire Cliff, obviously there's a direct line to Caleb Williams, but there's also a direct line in the air raid to Drake May. I think a lot of people in Washington, the first month when there wasn't a coach, were like, Jaden Daniels is the guy. Where are you at on the quarterbacks, and how does it specifically change for Washington with Cliff?
I have not studied them in the same way that other people have, just because that's something I typically do after the season ends, where I'll start digging into the prospects. I don't know how much signal it sends about who they should get and why, because you still need a dance partner in all this. The Bears need to be willing to move off of Caleb Williams.
By the way, everyone should know Robert's a Chicago guy.
Yes.
So very plugged in there.
I think that's part of the conversation, is that even if they want Caleb Williams, the Bears may want him as well. And there may not be a price that Washington's willing to pay that the Bears would say, all right, that's enough for us to take a step down from Caleb Williams to Drake May, if that's how they have them ranked. So I don't know how much it actually tells us about what the draft is going to look like.
So here's when I actually had a buddy of mine who works for ESPN 1000 in Chicago text me about this earlier today. I've done a bunch of interviews where I'm in your seat instead of mine, and people ask me the same thing. What about Washington and Caleb? And my response has been this, and I'm curious to run this theory by you as a Chicago guy. There is no way Caleb Williams shouldn't go one, whether the Bears are picking him or not. Like, there is just no – if Ryan Poles is anywhere decent as a general manager, there is no way a guy with that much hype and that much seen as a generational talent should be anything but the first pick. And the Bears have to leverage that. And
Yes.
if I'm the Commanders knowing that, that price is going to be too steep for me. Like, take Jimmy Johnson's draft chart, throw it up, and go out the window. If it's a generational prospect, I don't care if you're moving up one spot. You're not giving me 400 points worth of draft stock. Like, is that sound to you?
Yes. I think that if you believe that Caleb Williams is a better prospect, the price that you would have to get to move down from 1 to 2 should be astronomical. And it depends on who's willing to pay that. If Washington's willing to give up let's say you have them as whatever I don't know what the numbers are for a lot of these scouts, but let's say you have Caleb Williams as an A+ and Drake May as an A, and you think that the downgrade there is worth a future first-round pick and change. That's fine. I can understand that thought process. But you have to get a pretty big return in order to take that step down. And I think that's where the Bears have to be and what they have to be thinking.
I also get this question a lot from fans. I know my answer. I'm curious to yours. I'm not gonna lead you in any direction. If you're Washington, would you want Fields?
No, especially because I have options.
Right.
I mean,
I'm with you.
Yeah, I think it's the same conversation as the Bears have now. I think that Justin Fields is going to be an answer for a team without a path to a younger, cheaper quarterback. It's the same as it would have been the Bears' answer if they didn't have the number 1 overall pick.
Right.
If you're backed into a corner and Justin Fields is your best option, you can win with him. You can build a good offense around him. He's a capable NFL quarterback. But if you have an avenue to a higher upside and cheaper option, I absolutely think you should take door number 2.
Yeah. To me, Fields, obviously Pittsburgh now with Arthur Smith would make a lot of sense. Atlanta's always been the kind of spot for him. Is there anywhere else where you're like?
The Raiders, but now with Luke Getsy, I think that becomes a question. Does he want to work with him again? I would not be surprised if them hiring Getsy put them out of the Fields conversation. So Pittsburgh, Atlanta, I think, are the two that I would mention first, and we'll see what New England wants to do.
Yeah.
Does New England?
They're the wild card in this to me.
Because there's so many different layers to it. You have the first year of a front office. Do they want to attach themselves to a quarterback? Do they think that Jaden Daniels is just a better answer than Marvin Harrison Jr. would be at that spot? Or what's a better comparison? You use 3 to take Jaden Daniels. You use your second-round pick on a wide receiver, or you take Marvin Harrison at 3 and you use a second-round pick to trade for Justin Fields. Which of those is better? I have no idea. But
yeah.
New England
I would say
Harrison
and Fields. But also, my dream scenario for the Commanders is that New England falls in love with May. The Commanders convince everybody that they're in love with May, or that they find another team that's also in love with May. They swindle New England for the pick swap, make them go up. They wind up with Daniels at 3 and some extra draft capital. So that's my thing that I'm putting out in the universe.
I have not studied the quarterbacks enough to have a firm opinion, but the people that I trust, the people who
I know
watch
Nate's
these
a big.
Nate loves Drake May, and Dean Brugler, who does the most extensive work of anyone I know on these guys, really likes Drake May. And so if you're in a position to just take the guy and just kick off the next phase of your franchise, just do it.
Well,
just
100%. 100%.
Just do
well,
it.
I like Daniels, what I've watched better than May.
Gotcha,
so,
okay.
And that's the thing is like this goes true for this whole conversation we're having on all of these guys. All these different scouts, all these different GMs have different evaluations. How different they are could make a deal that works for both sides or blows up in both sides' face. Like, that is the nature of the silly season. All right, last but not least, with Robert Mays here from the Athletic Football Show. The whole reason we're here, there's 2 teams that are apparently going to play for a championship on Sunday.
That's what I heard, yeah.
Early lean on the game, one way or the other. Is there a thing that you're like, I feel good about picking the side I'm picking because X?
It's so funny because I love the Niners all year. I just thought they were so good. I love the offense. There were so many weeks this season where they just felt like an overwhelming juggernaut. The Niners, or the Cowboys game, the Eagles game. But as I've sat back and really thought about all the layers of the game, I just think it's a terrible matchup for them. There's some of the issues that they've had against the defenses they played against in the playoffs, Detroit specifically. All the things that Detroit did that gave the Niners issues, the Chiefs want to do those things and are better set up to do them. With better personnel, it's actually in their DNA, some of the funky pressures that they're going to bring, etc. And I think that if you play a static type of defense against Patrick Mahomes right now, you're asking to lose. And that's what the Niners are. The Niners are, we play with the 4-man front, we play a lot of zone coverage, we believe in the soundness of who we are, we think that ultimately you're going to make a mistake. And he is playing so well that banking on them to have a negative play, have a turnover, I think that's a bad bet. So I just think that so many things are lining up where even if these teams in a vacuum are close to even if the Niners, I think the line's still -2, I get that. I think the matchup specifically against KC is a very bad one for the San Francisco team.
I picked San Francisco at the start of the year. I picked against the Chiefs reluctantly in the first 2 playoff games they played, and I felt like a gigantic, or I guess the last 2 playoff games they played, and felt so, the words came out of my mouth. And I realized I was picking against Mahomes, and I was like, that's wrong. And so we'll make our official picks on Friday, and I feel like I'm supposed to pick the Niners. I picked them at the start of the year. You're not helping me in that regard, but I also, it's probably, you're confirmation biasing me because I feel myself leaning towards the Chiefs hard.
So many people are, and it's so funny to wind up in this spot. And the moment that I come back to is, let's go back to Christmas Day. You watch the Chiefs play that game against the Raiders, and you have a feeling about where the Chiefs are and what this Chiefs season is. It's easy to write them off. It's like, this is over.
Right.
It's been fun. Like, they just don't have it this year. And before that game against the Ravens kicked off that night for the Niners, they felt like they might have been the best team in the league.
Right.
So just think about how different this matchup feels now compared to what it was 5 weeks ago.
It's crazy. The Athletic Football Show, get it wherever you get your podcasts. Their YouTube page, as Robert said, will have all kinds of film breakdowns, all kinds of great stuff. Robert Mays, everybody, getting us started from Super Week. Again, Dan Quinn coming up at 5:15 today. Much more from Radio Row next on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Live on Radio Row in Las Vegas. Super Bowl Sunday here on the Team 980, of course. And we just want to remind you real quick that coming up at 5:15 today, new Commanders head coach Dan Quinn joins the show. He'll be giving us a call from Ashburn. So very excited to talk to DQ coming up at 5:15. But just before our show went live here in Las Vegas, in this chair that's sitting right next to me empty right now, former NFL executive Michael Lombardi sat down to chat, and here is that conversation. Welcome back to Radio Row, Las Vegas. I'm Craig Hoffman here on the Hoffman Show, the Team 980, always live on the free Odyssey app and live on YouTube at the Team 980. Joining us now on set, Michael Lombardi, former NFL executive and author of the new book called Setting the Record Straight on the coaches, players, and history of the NFL. Football done right is the idea. And Michael, that is, you're a good person to talk to right now because we in Washington, D.C. have a football team that is essentially starting over. Yeah. I'm curious, if just first of all, like, how well do you know Adam Peters, and what do you make of that hire and the task that he has ahead of him?
I don't know Adam at all, and I don't know, I know Dan Quinn. I don't know kind of how the setup that they have, to me, is always challenging because the NFL has never been about the general manager picking the play, running the team, and the coach coaching the team. That dynamic really is hard. Usually you want to have a coach kind of running the organization from how we're developing players and building. But look, Josh Harris, this is what he's done in basketball. I think this is what he's comfortable with. He wants to build a model. Obviously, they brought in, the Bob Myers to help with this. So, they're going to try their way and see where it goes.
I think it's interesting when their press conference the other day, they talked so much about collaboration. In your experience, like what does good collaboration look like, and then what do I would say bad attempts at collaboration that turned into power struggles look like?
Well, collaboration's a really good word, right? It sounds really good. So the idea is we're going to get a lot of smart people in a room, and we're going to make smart decisions. The problem is not all the smart people in a room are equally informed. Like, there is an expertise to the decision, and for me, I've been from the model of a pyramid where where information flows upward, and somebody who has the highest level of intellect makes a decision. Now, maybe that might be Peters, I don't know, but this idea that everybody's going to be collaborative in effort. You're in Washington, right? When you walk around the city of Washington, D.C., have you ever seen a monument dedicated to a committee?
I do not believe that there are any committee. I'm trying to think. There's got to be one somewhere.
No, there's no monument dedicated to committee.
Certainly not one of the big ones.
So collaboration is about committees. And sometimes in the NFL, you think you're being collaborative, when in reality, people are just telling you what you want to hear.
So let me just get straight to the point then. Do you not like this setup? Because I feel like most people in D.C. are psyched, and also we're coming out of 25 years of hell under the Snyder administration. But do you not like the way that they're presenting this?
Well, I said I was going to give it an opportunity. I think if you study the NFL like I have, and you've worked for Bill Walsh, who didn't have this dynamic, if you work for Al Davis, who didn't have this dynamic, if you work for Bill Belichick, who didn't have this dynamic, if you understand the two teams playing in the Super Bowl today here in Las Vegas, they don't have this dynamic, you kind of have a sense that, okay, maybe this isn't the way to go. But Josh Harris has done this at the 76ers. I'm a 76er fan. I'm fully aware of how he operates his franchise. So if he feels it's worked for him with the Sixers, and then with whether it was Sam Henke being collaborative on what he wanted to do, whether it was Bryan Colangelo being collaborative, whether it's Daryl Morey, then good for him.
Michael Lombardi with us here on Radio Row. What do you takes from San Francisco then? Because obviously he's been a part of one of the teams that is here. I would have to think that there is, even if there's an idea of collaboration, maybe that definition is shifted to whatever he's done.
They collaborated over when they traded up for Trey Lance. I think Kyle wanted to draft Mac Jones, and they wanted to draft Trey Lance, Lynch and Peters, and they collaborated and got the Lance pick done. So I think, look, he hired Dan Quinn, who runs the 49ers system of defense, so he's very familiar with that, and that'll lend himself. And then he hired a very good coach in Cliff Kingsbury that can handle some things. So I think, look, it's one of those where they're all going to have to come together, and everybody's going to have to get on the same page. But let's be clear, somebody's got to make the final decision.
Yeah. You mentioned Cliff. Did you cross with him in New England back in the day when he was a player?
I've known Cliff for almost my whole career. Yeah.
What do you think?
I think you have to separate two things. Like, Cliff is a head coach and Cliff is an offensive mind, right? Cliff's really good as a football coach. Maybe he isn't the best head coach in terms of defense, but he's really a good offensive coach, and he'll get the quarterback to play at a higher level. Plus, he understands what you have to do to win. I think one of the big things in Washington last year is you had a really bad offensive line, you had a very young quarterback, and you had an offensive coordinator who wanted to just call nothing but passes. And I said this from the beginning of the year, it was really one of the worst attention to detail jobs that you'll ever see in the league, because Eric didn't care about protecting the quarterback. He cared about calling pass plays.
Yeah, huge gripe on this show and many others. How adaptable do you feel like Cliff is to these top three quarterbacks? Obviously, May has run a version of an air raid system.
I think it's going to be Lance's decision. I think Lance is going to make the call. I think Peters is going to make the call. That's what he's there for.
Well, that's kind of what I'm asking, though, is like if Adam is talking to Cliff and talking to Dan and they eventually come to a decision.
You didn't hire Adam to basically make this decision on what Cliff thinks. If you're Josh
I understand that.
If you're
I'm
Josh
saying
Harris,
he's got
be able to do that.
He's got three quarterbacks that are seen. Cliff very well. I'm asking, no matter who Adam thinks is best, how adaptable is Cliff to be able to ultimately use that?
I think Cliff's really adaptable. I think Cliff's a football coach, and whomever you give him will be a good player for Cliff. He's made Kyler Murray a better player than we've seen Kyler be. So yeah, I think he's very adaptable.
What would you say are like the core principles for Cliff?
I think Cliff wants to spread the field. I think Cliff wants to get rid of the ball quickly. He wants to protect the quarterback. I think he understands that he has to have some balance and run the ball. I think he is truly a guy that makes the game easier for the quarterback with every single rep he takes.
I always ask this when people write books, totally shifting gears now. Why a book is such a monumental undertaking? Why did you want to write a book?
Well, it's my second book. I wanted to write a book about the history of the league. I don't think we pay enough attention to it. This game here, we're in Las Vegas, and this game is really the Bill Walsh game, because both offenses started with Bill Walsh from the 49ers. Both of them are in the West Coast offense, and Walsh is one of the foundational coaching trees that I write about in Football Done Right. It's about how do we build a team, how do we run an offense that takes advantage of the skill players and the offensive weapons that we have. So this game is really symbolic of the greatness of a man.
What in Kyle and Andy's offenses do you see as the core tenets that started from Bill, and then where have, through the many generations of evolutions that lead us to today, where have they veered off from that original?
It's all a rhythm passing game, right? So it's all about timing and rhythm. Walsh believed the quarterback was like a boxer. It was rhythm with his feet to throw the football. That hasn't changed. I think what they've done here is they've gone back to it, right? So they've gone back to this offensive mindset in Kansas City, where more rhythm. Mahomes was holding the ball really earlier in the year. Since the Cincinnati game after the Christmas Day game, they've gotten rid of the ball, and they've done a really good job with it.
Is there someone that you see as the defensive Bill Walsh?
Well, yeah, I think when you look at the guys that do a good job of adjusting their game plan every week to specifically attack their opponent, I think Mike McDonald did a great job of that. Guy only gave up 20 points in the playoff games, even though his team didn't advance. So I think Spagnuolo does a good job with that. When you say Walsh, what you're saying is he's a divergent thinker. He solves problems in a different way.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of good coaches like that. I think, that's one of Belichick's greatest strengths.
Do you think that the nature of – actually, this is an interesting thing, I think, for someone like you, because this came up a lot during the coaching search, is this idea of hiring an offensive versus a defensive coach. In your experience in studying the history of the league like you have, do you think that those two coaches, those two coaching archetypes, think differently about football?
They do. I think that the number one thing you have to hire is the best leader, because football is about leadership. And as much as we want to get into the strategy, the X's and O's of the game, which is the tactical part, you need somebody who understands the strategy of the game. I think that's really critical. How to set up a game. What Adam Peters wants to be able to do is bring an identity to Washington, to be able to say these are the kind of players that play here no matter who the coach is. That's how you have sustainable success.
Right.
When you're constantly changing and you're dependent upon who's the coordinator, who's the defense, it becomes much harder.
The book. All right, that was Michael Lombardi with us here on Radio Row. We taped that about 30 minutes before our show started. Plenty more guests to come in this empty seat next to me here in Las Vegas. But most importantly today, if we're being honest, with all due respect to everyone who will sit in that chair, our number one guest will be on the phone. That is Dan Quinn coming up at 5:15. Again, Dan Quinn, he was originally scheduled, and we know we promoted it on social media and everything, as 4:45. But Dan Quinn, 5:15, he will be calling us in just a little bit. That all part of our big game coverage on the Team 980, presented by Solo Stove. Feel the heat of the world's most popular smokeless fire pit, solostove.com. Plenty of that Lombardi interview to react to, though. We'll do that next on the Team 980.
Here's
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And if you are tuning in right now expecting to hear our interview with Dan Quinn, I apologize. Hold tight. The coach will be with us coming up in 30 minutes. 5:15, Dan Quinn joins us here on the Hoffman Show. So that's coming up in just a little bit. Right now, live with you from Radio Row in Las Vegas. I want to react to our last guest, Michael Lombardi, who had some pretty strong thoughts. That was interesting. I don't know Michael. We haven't had him on the show. This is the nature of Radio Row. He sits down. I ask, you're a front office guy. Let me ask you about the front office. And he immediately is like, don't like it. Coach-centric model's the way to go. And I'm sure that if you are a listener who is a Commanders fan, you have a fairly violent reaction to anything that is suggested coach-centric because that word has been poisoned thanks to the last 4 years, and with good reason, because I'm just going to be blunt with you. I vehemently disagree with Lombardi, but also think that Lombardi, because he covers the entire league and is writing a book and doing all the other things, I don't think he really understands the setup here. I don't think he actually understands what Adam Peters is trying to do and how this works. So Lombardi, to make sure I don't put words in his mouth, he talks about how we have this, you want the coach to be the most important person and drive the organization. And I think that is true. But that doesn't mean it's coach-centric. It doesn't mean that he's got to have the most power. Because at the end of the day, I think what Josh Harris said at his introductory press conference is very true and is ultimately true, that the GM job is an 80-hour-a-week job. The head coach job is an 80-hour-a-week job. And they are different jobs. They are jobs that require your full attention. And if you are someone who is coaching a football team all fall long, you simply cannot have the scouting eye that a general manager can have. And you're also going to have your biases and things compared to what you normally watch, compared to, which sometimes, by the way, is good. I think good organizations use the fact that, hey, we have this group of scouts and coaches who only watches pro tape 11 months out of the year, and let's take 1 month to have them watch college tape and see who stands out to them. But I think that the larger point here is that they need to work together and with the coach setting how the team is going to play. It's not that a general manager is establishing play style, is establishing scheme, is establishing any of those things. It's that he is going to find players who fit in what the coach wants. And I'm going to swerve to come back. We're going to take a small detour and come back. It is very common in European soccer to have what they call a director of sporting, which is kind of a general manager. And that person will actually dictate how a team plays. And the reason for that is actually very smart, because in especially the lower levels, if you're not Manchester United, if you're not Man City, if you're not Arsenal, if you're not Liverpool, if you're not Inter Milan, the clubs that if you play the video game formerly known as FIFA have 5 stars, like if you're good, your coach is getting poached. Your best players are getting poached. So having someone who is committed to the organization that is dictating continuity is really valuable. That's not how it works in the NFL. The NFL, you want the best coach available, and if that means you had a 3-4 and you're going to a 4-3, or you were a team that ran a ton under center and now you want to hire a coach that's spread, you can remake the roster fast enough that you don't be like, oh, we need continuity, even if it means a year of pain because some of the players don't fit. And so what I think is actually happening here, what I think is ultimately going to make this work, and the reason why I have confidence that it is going to work is because I think Adam Peters understands that. Like, he comes from San Francisco. We don't think that, does he have any qualms that the most important person in the organization is Kyle Shanahan? Of course not. And what they've been able to do, and Peters was an enormous part of this, if not the biggest part. All due respect to John Lynch. But, if you listen to the people in the scouting community, Peters is as respected as anybody because he took what Kyle wanted. He didn't say, this is what I want. He took what Kyle wanted and said, and was able to say, this guy's what you want. Or in reverse, hey, here's this Deebo Samuel guy I really like. I don't know if this is exactly how it went with Deebo, but these are the two paths that they've traveled in San Francisco. Is, hey, Deebo does X, Y, and Z. Does that fit for you? Do you have a plan for him? The best example of this recently is this video that went viral of Les Snead, the Rams GM, talking to Sean McVay about Puka Nacua, who we saw walking around earlier in a very nice Letterman jacket and some Travis Scott Nikes. So that's good job, Puka. Anyway, basically it was like, he doesn't do this, but he does this, this, and this extremely well. And Sean was like, I know exactly what to do with that guy. They take him and he sets the rookie receiving record. It wasn't that Les Snead was like, oh, we have to draft Puka Nacua. I'm the GM, GTFO, McVay. It was like, hey, I kind of like this guy. He's got some limitations. What do you think? Oh, McVay, I know what to do with him. Let's take him. That's how that works. So the idea that it is GM versus coach or whatever centric is just not, like, it's not a reality. It does have to be a collaboration. It does have to be each guy doing his job to an extremely high level. The GM can't coach the team, but the coach can't be your best scout either. They've got to be good at using information that the scouts give them. They've got to make sure that there's an understanding of how the talents cross. But at the end of the day, we're talking about the GM being able to GM and lead a scouting department and help set a path and the resources, making sure that the resources available for player development and the coach coaching the football team. That's all it means. And I will also say this, like, if you think the coach-centric model works where the coach has all the power, like, you're just not paying attention to the NFL, which is pretty crazy for someone who wrote a book who is trying to describe the history of the NFL. Belichick, the last decade has been bad for him in player development and a scouting standpoint. Brady saved his butt for the first half decade. They've been terrible for the last half decade because they haven't drafted a player that got into a second contract in New England since 2013. That's just the reality of the situation. Pete Carroll and John Schneider's relationship, yes, Pete technically had all the power, but he also deferred to Schneider most of the time. And to the point that Schneider mentioned that in the post-game press conference after the Pete Carroll was let go. So I just think that the reality of the situation is that there isn't an example of a good coach-centric model. Well, there are plenty of good examples of, and this is where I wonder if this is just a matter of semantics, is you have plenty of examples where the coach sets a vision, the GM executes it, but they rely on the fact that the GM is the expert at his job and the coach is the expert at his job, and that is what wins in the NFL and, frankly, in any organization, in any business where people do their jobs well and actually respect the boundaries of said jobs. All right, when we get back, we might have a guest here on Radio Row, so we'll figure it out. Yes, or actually, tell you what, let's do it. We can do that right now. What's up, man? Yeah, we're gonna go live on the air right now, and I'm gonna throw Justin Pugh to the fire. You could, because you will not recognize this because it has been a long time, Justin Pugh. But you and I have talked before because we went to Syracuse together. Back in the day. So I've interviewed you before. What do you want to know about me?
What was your favorite bar at Syracuse?
Chuck's, which is now gone.
It's gone. The basement
yeah,
of CVS? Oh, no,
yeah.
no, that's Harry's.
Yeah, Harry's was the basement of CVS.
That was the basement of CVS. Those were the good days.
Yeah.
What was your major? Obviously.
Broadcast.
I was giving you a layup just to kind of like ease us into it.
I see how this is going.
Where do you live now?
D.C. So we're the sister station of them, which is where you're eventually, I think, going to wind up. But
your favorite commander of all time?
Ooh, my favorite. See, I didn't grow up in the area.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in South Carolina, so I was a Panthers guy growing up.
Okay.
Musa Muhammad was one of my favorites all time.
Unbelievable.
Tough
I was
guy
thinking
receiver.
you were going to go Steve Smith. You know,
Smitty was a favorite. I might have had an '89 jersey.
I was an Eagles fan growing up, so when you guys beat us to go to the Super Bowl, that was devastation.
Yeah, I remember. That was a good day for me, bad day for you.
Last question, and you can start yours. If you were stranded on an island, only one thing to eat on the island, what would it be?
Oh, man. Some kind of protein, some sustenance. I can't be hungry.
What are you watching Survivor? You're trying to get rice and you're trying to win the challenge?
Maybe I'm hungry right now and I just want some sustenance.
You're trying to get a grilled chicken breast?
I mean, probably something a little heavier than that.
Okay, if you're ever in Philadelphia, you got to go to Angelo's, the cheesesteak and the pizza. It's the best on planet Earth.
Okay, wife's from Philadelphia, definitely up there from time to time. Justin Pugh is here with Lovesac, who is a home furnishing and technology company brand, best known for its better than a beanbag sacks, and adaptable called Sactionals. We just got a new sectional couch at our house. We didn't got it Sactional. I should have talked to you first.
It's the new Stealth Tech, and I have one in my house, and they have the speakers, the subwoofers all built in. They got the cup holders, wireless charging. I can just had a 2 week. I have a 2-week-old daughter that was just born. She spits up on the couch. We take the cover off, throw it in the laundry, right back on. The in-laws are out here right now. It turns into a queen-size bed.
Beautiful.
What can it do?
Nothing,
what
apparently.
What can it do?
All right, so we're short on time, so I do want to get, after you've interviewed me and we've gotten the plug in, you can go to lovesac.com for more information. Yeah. They taught us that at Syracuse. Make sure you take care of the business, you know?
Exactly.
You played for Cliff, who obviously just got hired as the offensive coordinator in D.C. Someone's like, hey, tell me about Cliff. What do you tell him?
He gets guys open. He is one of the best guys creating space for his players. The thing about Cliff and going to Washington, it just reminds me of what happened in Arizona, where he comes in, we have Josh Rosen, we really don't know if we're going to go quarterback, and then we take Kyler Murray. It's just eerily similar that he goes to Washington. They have the number 2 overall pick. Is there something in the works here where Caleb Williams ends up in Washington? The one thing I know is you will have your talented receivers running wide open, because that's what Cliff does.
Yeah, which for a receiving core that didn't rank great on the separation data, the next-gen stats, all that kind of stuff last year, would be nice. Would definitely like to see that. For you as an offensive lineman, run game, how did you like the run game that he implemented in Arizona?
I love it. It fit my skill set. We're on the line. We're going fast. We're running zone schemes. It's going to be great for the offensive line that you guys have. Obviously, there's maybe I'm down in Washington. Maybe Cliff gives his old left guard a call and said, hey, you want to come venture to the Capitol?
If you found yourself in the NFC East on an emergency this year, then maybe we can do it with some planning this time around.
Exactly. No, Cliff's unbelievable. He's a great guy. And the one thing I love about Cliff is he doesn't get too high or too low. He is even keeled, and that's what it takes to win in the NFL. You need to be, just stable throughout all the ups and downs, because seasons get crazy, and he is the gold standard for that.
I felt like that really came through in Hard Knocks, who was with you guys that last season in Arizona. Obviously it didn't go well, but to see him just nose to the grindstone, seemed like he was the same guy every week. I guess the big concern that I would ask you as a guy who was there, the big concern with Cliff and his record is start fast, falls off. What did you notice from defenses either changing or adapting to you guys that you think, if Cliff called you and was like, hey, Pugh, I'm getting this another shot, what do I need to do to make sure it's more sustainable? What would you tell him?
The one thing that I've noticed from teams that had sustained success is the run game always meshes with the pass game. It all starts with the run game, and obviously Cliff is known for the air raid and throwing the ball all the way around. Make sure we're focusing on the run game too, because that opens up the pass game, and he always did that. Obviously, there's players that are involved in this too, like us not doing our job, and
sure.
We've had some good seasons, and there's a reason that he's so highly sought after in the offensive community because of what he can do. So he clearly learned from what he did in Arizona. I'm excited for what he's going to do in Washington. I think you guys have the right pieces in place, and I can't wait to see it.
Is there any piece in particular? I mean, I think we all think of Terry, obviously, on the outside as big, explosive down the field wide receiver. But as an O-line guy or whatever it is there a piece when you make that comment that's in mind?
I mean, you got to run the ball, and I think Brian Robinson, the guy that you guys have, that's like a thud, breaking tackles. Make sure you're feeding him. It's similar to a guy we had in Arizona, James Conner, who's like that thumper running back. Set the tone. You guys just dropped back and passed the ball every time this past year, and teams are teeing off. Give your offensive line a little bit of a break. Put them in a friendlier situation. Allow them to build their confidence, and then you can go air it all around with Caleb Williams if that ends up going that direction.
Yeah, that's Justin Pugh just stopping by. Some Q
straight
guys
off the couch, hanging out.
Yep.
Appreciate you guys.
What's next for you, man? How you still going to try to play this year?
Yeah, still going to try to play. Just train.
And then you're going to come take all our jobs. You're good at this.
Yeah, well, I just signed with Mark Lepselter. I'm going to start doing the broadcasting route, try that out a little bit.
Nice.
Started my own podcast, Net Worth with Justin Pugh, so I've kind of been doing the behind the scenes in the podcasting world. So we'll see how it goes. I also like real estate. So real estate is
I can tell you this as a radio guy.
I know.
A lot more lucrative in real estate than it is in the broadcast. Well, hey, unless you make it, you get one of these big stages. I think that those guys do all right. So
I know. I'm going to try to sneak on Pat McAfee's stage while he's gone from lunch and try to yell some things.
There you go. And you saw the Newhouse kids. They got Syracuse University students here.
I know. I actually did Ithaca. The Syracuse kids came up and said what's up, and it was a little bit too late. I got to run and catch a bird though. I got to go.
All right, man. Well, safe travels.
Great seeing you again.
You as well.
It's been a decade.
It's Justin Pugh, everybody, with us on the Hoffman Show. You can go. You got to catch a plane. When we get back, we'll react to what Justin just said, and then Dan Quinn is joining us at 5:15. All right, hour number 2 of the Hoffman Show here on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Just got the set crashed by my fellow Orangeman, Justin Pugh, NFL guard. Spent last year with the Giants, straight off the couch, and then was with Cliff Kingsbury in Arizona, so great stuff from JP on that. Again, coming up in about 7 minutes from right now. I'm guessing he will be prompt and on time. Dan Quinn feels like a prompt, on-time kind of guy. We were told earlier today, we think it'll be 4:45, but it might be 5:15. Sean with the Commanders PR staff let us know right as the show started, hey, sorry, it will be 5:15. But I'm guessing it will be right at 5:15. Dan Quinn is going to call in to this here radio show. The Commanders' new head coach with us in less than 10 minutes. As for right now, quick reaction to what Pugh just said, talking about Cliff and the running game. I think that, he talked about marrying the pass and run game, and he kind of touched on it. I wish we had more time, but he had to go catch a plane, so we didn't have a lot of time with Pugh there. That was kind of also an unscheduled crash. That is one thing that I think does lead to sustainability and does lead to you having a better offense. And it is something that I don't really understand why more teams don't do. I think Cliff does some of it, and part of that is his heavy usage of the RPO. Where if you have run-pass option, obviously your pass game and your play-action game and your run game all marry together because it's all the same game. It's one play call and your quarterback makes a decision either pre-snap or during that ultimately unlocks the success of that play. But I also think that if you're going to be a little bit more under center, or the way that you block up a play action versus a run play, it should look identical. To me, the perfect play action is always the quarterback could just pull the ball out on a run and everyone else would act the exact same, and then the quarterback would throw a pass behind it. It's almost like the running back and the offensive line shouldn't know. The O-line needs to know, obviously, because if they really win their blocks and get too far downfield and then the pass is thrown, you get a legal man downfield. So it's not exactly like that. But, the best fakes are the ones that have that kind of sell. The best example ever, Peyton Manning had one versus the Cowboys back in 2013 where he called a run play, a halfback dive, and got them all amped up in the huddle, and then he didn't tell anybody he was going to pull it, and he just naked bootlegged out, fooled everybody, including the cameraman, and ran it in for a touchdown. So, that's the level of fake we're talking about. That's the level of marriage I would like to see, and I think that, if you get that, Brian Robinson's physical running style that teams have to gear up for will really help sell that. And then obviously, can you use the speed that you have, Jahan, Terry, Diami, and then whoever else they bring in, Mitchell Tinsley is the only other wide receiver currently under contract, to get the ball down the field, take advantage of space, and as Pugh said, his offense is going to get guys open. It's going to be on whatever quarterback they get in to make plays. So many questions for Dan Quinn. I don't need to tease a million of them. Dan Quinn is next. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Also streaming live on the free Odyssey app and on YouTube at the Team 980. And it is our pleasure right now, as I am live in Las Vegas on Radio Row, to light up the phone line back to Ashburn as we are joined by the head coach of the Washington Commanders. It is Dan Quinn. DQ, Craig Hoffman here with you. Thanks so much for your time, sir. Are you used to getting introduced as the Commanders head coach yet?
It feels good, Craig. I know that. And, yeah, I'm really pumped to be here and to get to know you and the fan base here. And so it's a cool time, man. We're just getting rocking, but a lot of energy here in the building and moving forward, hitting on some staff stuff. That's, a number one, top of the pile right now, and keep hitting these processes as we go, man.
Yeah, I know you are busy hiring the staff, so appreciate a few minutes of your time here on the radio. Let's dive right in. I was aware of this 360 review that you did, even when you were a candidate, because it involved calling so many people and trying to figure out how to be better the next time you got that shot, as you said on Monday. And one of them happened to be my podcast co-host and Logan Paulson. So I'm curious, as you went through that process, how much of the information that you got, the feedback that you got, was things that you were like, yep, I knew that? And then how much of it was new information to you where you're like, man, I'm so glad I did this review so that I know this thing when I get my next chance?
Yeah, and that's cool that Logan shared that with you, because when I asked, I didn't want to know anybody. And so some were like, hey, put my name on this or say it. But I'm glad that they reached out to Logan, because I've always thought, like, as a player, man, this guy had perspective. He could see things. He was a leader. So that's cool to hear that he was one of the people, because I think it's spoken to about, 40 to 50, current players, former players, current coaches, former coaches. So it was valuable to me. I would say going into it, I didn't want to have any biases to know who was there and what can I do better. So what they did, Craig, is they, kind of went through the strengths to say, hey, man, don't change this. Keep this the same. This is something that you want to hit on. And then at the, on the other side to say, what were some blind spots? What were some things to make sure that I want him to know this? And so that's what helped me. I'd say going into it, I had fresh eyes, Craig. I didn't want to go in, I bet it's this, I bet it's that. I just said, hey, I'll see the information when I get it. I didn't try to, predict what it would be. I would say after reading it, I wasn't surprised to hear that some thought I was probably pushing yourself too thin, helping here, helping here, helping here. And so that's sometimes what we all do, right? You can help with this, you can help with this. I wanted to make sure I stayed, right down the middle with the team, the staff, the players, and focus on the things that we could get better at. And what's good, Craig, is I got, a chance to do that, to apply some of those things, during my time, on the next job when I went to Dallas. So coming here, it's not, starting it from that space, 4 years ago. It was actually things I got to do to put into play coming to here. And that was really the goal behind it, man, to say, can I find these things to absolutely nail it? And then I had a chance to work on it. It's one thing to recognize it, right? But then it's another thing to put it into play.
Yeah, no, the implementation is always huge in a situation like that. You mentioned spreading yourself too thin as being one of those things that is a real focus for you. And I think here a lot of people look back at the previous 4 years and see a coach that was potentially stretched too thin and are happy to see the setup as it is. But for you, like, how different is the setup for Dan Quinn in Atlanta versus Dan Quinn in Washington?
Yeah, I would say coming into, this opportunity here, certainly looking for, a general manager as a partner to go through it. So I don't know if it's different as much, Craig, in terms of setup. A lot of the clubs, there's ownership structure and general manager. It's honestly, man, just keeping, like Adam's going to do a fantastic job on personnel, and we've got excellent coaches on some scheme stuff. And so, like, when we get through to that, the secret sauce of most good teams, man, as you know this, it's that play style, and it's being that dog-ass competitor and all the things we do. It's the speed, the way that we would hunt on defense. It's the way you sprint off the ball, the explosive plays and finishing plays. And so that's, to me, what separates teams. It's, yeah, you get the personnel right, and all the teams have, scheme-wise and challenge people with motions and leverages and blitzes and disguises. But it's that last piece, man, that makes it. And that's the attitude, the swagger, the toughness, the tackling, the finishing, the hitting. That's what brings all of this together. And when you can hit all three of those, Craig, and there's a lot of good teams that have good personnel and you can be short on another, or a lot of teams that have good scheme but maybe don't have the finish of it. But when you put all three, talk about, like I said, out hitting and finishing and tackling and the speed and the effort and just straining so damn hard for your teammates, that's the separator. And that's what we're going to strive to do. And it's not just that you call it up on game days, the way you practice, the way you train. And so that's what I'm looking forward for you and, for everybody else watching us play when we get it. Think of it like offense, defense, and special teams. You have to have all three rocking. Well, same thing. It's the personnel connection, the scheme connection, and then, honestly, just the play style connection.
So, Dan, if we get a chance to do this with any kind of frequency and you get to know me, you will know that the art of coaching is a bit of an obsession of mine. And all those things that you say sound great, but I would love to dig just one step deeper. And basically the question is, like, how do you accomplish that? Because every team says they want to play fast. Every team wants to be physical. You're never going to interview a coach and be like, yeah, physicality, meh, don't really care about it. But as you said earlier, like the knowledge of what to do versus the implementation of doing it. You've had so much success doing it. How do you actually get that out of NFL players?
Yeah, I think you get what you emphasize, right, Craig? And so when you can spread yourself too thin, I want to look at this personnel and I want to get onto the scheme and the play style, like you can get watered down. And so you want to make sure that you nail that. And so that is something that I won't back off of. I just won't. I'm, firmly believe that, when you play against a team that really brings it and has the other part of their game together, that's what makes, it all go. And honestly, to me, that's the essence of a head coach. How do you tie offense and defense and special teams and chemistry and the message you want to be and your play style? Like, that's literally the job of the coach, to tie all that together. And if you need to emphasize something a little bit more, hey, you need more short yardage work here. We need more red zone. You pull those levers and you pull those strings. And so to me, that's what's the fun challenge of the job, is tying all of it together and bringing these, the players, the coaches, the staff, the building, the fans, all of that kind of connects into this. And that's what makes the job hard. It makes it fun, but it takes special traits to do that. And that's the essence of the job at the end of it, is to pull the whole thing together. And that's what I intend on doing.
Dan Quinn, head coach, Washington Commanders, with us here on the Hoffman Show. when you get to the personnel side of it, you mentioned a couple of position groups you like the other day, but I think a lot of us look at this roster as observers from the last year and say, it feels like there was more talent here than the record, but you've actually got to make that differentiation with Adam. So how do you, from a process standpoint, I'm not stupid enough to think that you're going to call out any kind of single player here, but from a process standpoint, how do you differentiate positions and players that need to be upgraded versus players that were maybe misused and have a skill set that can be unlocked?
Yeah, I think it first starts, Craig, and what the best way on the team is you want to make cut-ups on each player, and that's where the evaluation starts, in your own house first, and finding unique traits that players have, and then how would we feature them within the scheme. So every single player on our roster has a cut-up built on them. This is how they play. These are the strengths. These are the things that we want to keep emphasizing. And so when you start there, Craig, in your own space, and this is not just starting here now, this is a annual one to go. And then after you do that assessment, then you can kind of get into what I would call, like in the simplest terms, must. Then this must happen. We have to have this personnel to add to be who we want to be. And then there's some needs. Okay, we need this spot. It might be a third tackle. It might be a third linebacker. And then there's wants, and that's, what does the fifth receiver look like? And we want to upgrade, the space, at this certain position. So assessing your own team first, Craig, that's a number one, top of the pile to go. Who are we? How do we want to play to our identity? How can we feature these unique players? Do they have traits that maybe they hadn't seen yet? Do they have to change position? I've done it before where, a corner moves over to safety. A safety goes down to linebacker. There's those are the things that you could look at, and you get into the musts and needs and wants, and that's why, going and, talking with Adam and the scouting staff here of putting that whole thing together, that's this puzzle. And you find pieces in the free agency, you find pieces in the draft, and how do you bring it all together? And so it's a constant evaluation to just keep tweaking, keep trying to get better, keep pushing it, and we're going to do that as hard as we can, because that's the name of the game, to find tough-ass, competitive guys that want to just absolutely bring it. The more you add that on your team, the more competitive and tough and that you'll be. So that's what we're looking to do.
Last question for Dan Quinn, Commanders head coach, with us here on the Hoffman Show. Cliff has obviously had a lot of success in the NFL, but he also, as we all know, it didn't go well at the end in Arizona, and had this kind of pattern of starting hot and then teams kind of getting on to what he was doing. And I'm curious for you, Dan, from where you sit as you hire him as your offensive coordinator, what the conversations were like between you and him to give you the confidence that he did something similar to what you did, going back and kind of having those honest conversations and reviewing to ultimately find out how to be sustainably successful in the way that you guys want to here in D.C.
Yeah, and that's why I think he's excellent. That's what the best of the best do, right? I want to find this lesson. I want to find it to go, and this guy is a rare competitor, talking about Cliff, and he's constantly digging to find it. And so you evaluate and you look at it, and you dig deep and you find your truth, and you say, okay, this is what needs to change, and this is what needs to stay the same. And so I think, like, in the simplest terms, what do you start doing? What do you stop doing? What do you do different? And what do you do exactly the same? And if you follow that pattern, you're going to keep refining, and that's what you do. And every team, as you know, like, it's a little different year to year. This is not like in the NBA, like, hey, we're going to keep our same roster going into the next year. There's constant changing, and, like, it's one of the best parts of coaching, Craig. Like, the learning never stops. And so what was, good offensively or defensively 10 years ago is evolving and changing. And what doesn't change is, like, standards of effort and finishing and, taking care of the ball and creating takeaways. Like, those stand the test of time. The scheme part will change. Maybe the size and speed of players can change some, but, like, the essence of this game of blocking and tackling and hitting and running and connecting and going through that, like, that's the same, dude.
The principles never change if they're right. Dan Quinn, the new Commanders head coach, with us here on the Hoffman Show. DQ, very much appreciate your time. Look forward to the next time we get to chat. And good luck with hiring the staff and then getting into those cut-ups.
All right, Craig. I appreciate it, man. Enjoy the time out in Vegas.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Dan. That is Dan Quinn, everybody, the Commanders head coach, with us here on the Hoffman Show. We will react to what he said and then dive into the YouTube comments. Never read the comments next here on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show here on the Team 980. Always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. We are live in Las Vegas, where we are on Super Bowl Radio Row. And we got a bunch of great guests still to come. But, of course, thank you to Dan Quinn for joining us. He is extremely busy right now, and thanks to the Commanders' PR staff for sticking with us. We were hoping to get DQ on Monday out in Ashburn, but you just had so many things going on, and like they are legitimately we are kind of squeezed in between him hiring a staff, and they realize it's really important that our coach does interviews with local media and the relationships that helps develop with the fans. fans, and like they realize all that stuff, but there's also stuff to do. So for DQ to take some time out, we really appreciate it. Gives thoughtful answers, and I'll say it again, like I really like DQ. It doesn't mean that I'm like, oh yeah, that dude's gonna win a Super Bowl, but he obviously can. Dude, he already coached the team who was up 28-3 and won, but he also had the MVP of the league that year. You know, he had Julio Jones. It's gonna take great players. It's gonna take building, but I think when it comes down to kind of the art of coaching and understanding what it means to be a leader, and we keep hearing that word, right? That word, that leadership word. It's so essentially important. And there's a reason why people like Adam Peters and Josh Harris, who've been successful in business, or in Peters' case, been a part of 3 different Super Bowl winning organizations, why they're like, I don't care about, not that I don't care about, but I don't prioritize the scheme. I don't prioritize, having the next boy genius. Not that they didn't want to talk to Ben Johnson or Mike McDonald. Not that they potentially had the interviews gone different, hired them. But they ultimately came out of the interviews, and obviously Johnson pulled himself out, but it seemed like there was some real questions about him after that interview based off a lot of the reporting. And then McDonald, he was kind of torn between Seattle and ultimately decides Seattle before Washington has a chance to make a decision on him. I think Breer did a great story today that talked about how Raheem Morris probably would have been a bigger factor here as well. But the more they talked to Quinn, they just kind of went like, this is the guy. And I think that's, I don't know, just judging by YouTube comments, by tweets, and quick reaction to that interview that we just did, like, I think the more people hear from Dan Quinn, the more people get it. The more people understand why everybody loves this dude. And I will admit, I have confirmation bias here, because there are things that Dan Quinn says that that have been like active parts of my life for years. I mentioned in the interview with DQ, I love discussing the art of coaching because I'm a coach. Like, yes, this is my day job. This is what I do. This is what pays my bills. But I also have this other career in fitness, and at the end of the day, like, it is coaching, right? If you are a personal trainer or a performance coach, which are the things that I do in that space, like, I'm working with people, and some of them are high-level athletes, and you are trying to get the best out of them. You're trying to put them in a position to succeed. And in order to do that, you have to understand them as people. You have to develop and manage a relationship. Like, there's so much that goes into that. And then when you think about kind of that next layer down beyond all that stuff that's not superficial but lives on the surface, that sounds really good, there are these kind of phrases, and they're catchphrases, but they're also mantras. And there's 2 that I think have been the guiding lights for me. And these are things that I apply to that coaching side of my life, but also have helped guide me in life in general, in my career, in my personal relationships, in my family relationships, in everything that I do, right? And those 2 things, well, I guess rule number 1 is do no harm. That is rule number 1. But rule number 2 is keep the main thing the main thing. And that is something that Quinn verbatim talked about, that what it does is it prevents you from getting distracted. What it does is it prevents you from trying to do too much. And when I asked him, okay, you say you want a fast, physical, explosive to be kind of the thing, and we have to play hard, and we have to finish, and we have to strain, how do you actually get that out? And he said, you get what you emphasize. And I think when you are on that every day, and you don't get too caught up in the moment. Say a guy, here's an example, right, to kind of illustrate and illuminate that. You're out there running a play, and a receiver is supposed to come down and block on the play, and he takes a bad angle. Or he's supposed to run a certain route, and he runs the wrong route. And a lot of coaches would be like, we are fed up with you not running the right routes. And look, if it happens all the time, like, you have to talk about it. But do you emphasize it? But like, if he ran the wrong route really hard, and he was fully dedicated to it, he's given the effort you want, he's given the strain you want, he's doing all those things. Do you say, hey, man, I love the way you're playing right now, but by the way, your route was, you ran it in, you're supposed to run it out. Or I love the effort, the intensity, that's exactly what we want. We just got to get the play right. And then the player's like, oh, yeah, and then the next time they do the right thing. Or do you blow them up because they can't get the assignment right? Like, what you emphasize, what you actually put effort into, is what you ultimately will get, and what you tolerate, right? If a guy is doing the right things the wrong way, do you pull him off the field and be like, no, we don't do it like that here? I'd rather have someone run, what's to the wall, the wrong route, than half-bake the right one. Like, what do you emphasize? What's more important to you? And again, this is like on any singular play or in a practice or whatever. If a dude just runs the wrong route all the time, you're going to find a way to replace him. I don't care how hard he plays, because that's going to mess up your offense. Or if he runs the wrong coverage, like that's going to lead to coverage bust. You can't live with that. But it also probably speaks to not applying yourself in other ways. So at the end of the day, like, what do you emphasize? And then the other third thing, or rule number 1 is do no harm. Rule number 2 is keep the main thing the main thing. The kind of third thing that I would say is there's this phrase that my good pal Chris Gorez taught to me a long time ago. Chris is my mentor in the fitness world and is one of the best coaches of anything that I've ever seen in my whole life. He has a way with people that is magic. And when it comes to adapting over time, he talks about how methods are many, principles are few. Methods don't always last, principles always do. And if Dan Quinn hasn't heard that phrase, I would be surprised. Because he talked about how, we cover 3 this, or we changed the fronts here, or we had to change how we schemed that up. But the principles of going hard, straining, finishing, physicality, togetherness, connectivity within a team, those things never change. The methods are the coverages, the fronts, the schemes, the stuff that we spend a lot of time on, because it is really important to be using the right methods in whatever era you're in is obviously critically important. But if you don't execute them on the basis of your principles, on the basis of effort, connectivity, if you don't have a locker room together, none of that stuff matters. And that's really what it is. It's like it's an order of operations type of thing. Do you actually establish the culture that you want? Do you actually establish the kind of player that you want, who you want to be, the way you want to represent yourself, the culture that you want in your locker room, the culture you want in your organization? And you have to switch your play style from a run first to a pass first, from a 3 down to a 4 down, to a nickel to a base, to a dime to a this, to a that. All that stuff is movable, but you're going to do it with physicality, with explosiveness, with speed, with connectivity, and those seem to be the things that Dan Quinn thinks are the most important thing. And again, it's confirmation bias for me. I fully admit that. And so there are some of you that are not excited about this hire, or that disagree with some part of what he said and some part of all of that, that will just be like, yeah, but he still blew a 28-3 lead and is a 500 coach, and yeah, all that stuff is true. You got to eventually get it all right. It's the toughest league in the world. But the stuff that he cares about, to me, is the right stuff. The stuff that he cares about, to me, in my opinion, is the important stuff. And that, without that stuff being as a baseline, there's nothing to build on. If you build a house and the foundation isn't there, it doesn't matter how nice your drapes are. You got to have the foundation right. And I believe, not in some like rah-rah whatever fan way, I'm not a part of the organization. I'm someone who covers them. But I do believe, as an opinion, my take, if you will, to use the word of the ever here on Radio Row, an endless land of takes behind me, that Dan Quinn has the right stuff forward to get this franchise on the right track. When we get back a little later than usual, but it's a Wednesday, it's the 5 o'clock hour. Let's read some comments. Never read the comments. Next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app, and we are streaming live on YouTube from Radio Row, where our big game coverage on the Team 980 is presented by Solo Stove. Feel the heat of the world's most popular smokeless fire pit, solostove.com. All right, it is time. Well, we're a little bit late, but when you have Dan Quinn on the show, you move things around. If you missed our interview with DQ, make sure you check the podcast. Anthony will have it up shortly. You can also rewind in the Odyssey app. But right now, it is time for Never Read the Comments.
We tried to warn them. They didn't listen.
Yeah!
Every week, the Hoffman Show goes into the belly of the beast.
We read those comments, baby.
Never read the comments.
All right, we are skedaddling as quickly as we can because this will have to be an abbreviated version of Never Read the Comments. But Jerry Cothran, 7857, says, I'm not going to get excited over all this hoopla. I've been built up and let down too many times before. I'm going to just take a wait-and-see attitude. I'm not going to have high expectations, but I do want and expect clear signs of adult professional leadership and a competitive team and improvements from week to week. Fingers crossed. I think this is a fine, responsible take from Jerry and represents where a lot of Commanders fans are. I would say it's a new day. New ownership matters a lot. Having real adults who other people wanted to work for them matters a lot in Adam Peters. And yes, Dan Quinn. Again, Quinn pulled himself out of head coaching searches the past couple of years. Other people would have hired him, and he's like, I don't really want to go there. Washington was the job he ultimately got excited about this season. So we will see what ultimately happens. If you want to get out over your skis, that's fine. I get it. You're tired of being Charlie Brown kicking the football, but we'll see where this goes. Molten Metal 5645 says on Cliff Kingsbury, an offensive mad scientist, dude had Mahomes and Kyler and got fired at both places. He was the head coach both places, not the offensive coordinator. Those offenses did just fine. Go back and watch Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech. He put up literal video game numbers, and Kyler had really fantastic numbers. It's why he got paid all that money. Like he can send Cliff Kingsbury some dollars for all the money. Not that Cliff needs it. He also got paid very well for his many gifts. Cliff focusing on just the offense will be a really good thing for him. I actually was listening to an old interview with Cliff, Peter Schrager, and Sean McVay. Schrager and McVay did a podcast one summer. I think it was during COVID because they were bored. And Sean needed something to do, and Schrager was like, let's do a podcast, and so they did. And they had Cliff on, and, Cliff and Sean talked about how when you're the OC and the head coach, because Cliff was the head coach in Arizona at the time, he said, you have to find time for the other stuff. Like, running the offense is really hard, and I think his ability to just focus on the offense will be a good thing. And by the way, if you want to see how that works sometimes, look at Dan Quinn, defensive coordinator, versus Dan Quinn as head coach. Obviously, he's got to fix that here, but that's kind of what happened to him in Atlanta. Stephen Kogan, 3718, says, I like that you're consistently bringing up the regression or stagnation of Kingsbury's offense in the second half of seasons. I really hope that makes Kingsbury's radar and that he acknowledges it and really looks to rectify it. Well, we asked Dan Quinn about that 30 minutes ago, and he said, Cliff has taken a look at that. And there's this incredible quote from Quinn on Kingsbury. He said, this guy is an elite competitor. That is music to my ears, because if you're truly an elite competitor, you have no ego. It is about winning. And obviously, there's a lot that goes into that, and everything I said in the last segment about connectivity and all that kind of stuff actually does contribute to winning. It's not frou-frou. It's not fluff. It matters. But at the same time, so does sequencing of plays. So does adapting and changing throughout a season. So does the ability to be multiple. And I think all of those things can certainly be things that Cliff works on and can apply himself more to achieve, because he doesn't have to go then run a team meeting and worry about what his defensive coordinator is doing. Brandon Scott, 8160, on our interview with Sam Fortier about Cliff Kingsbury, had this to say. Craig, I think your mention of this being an incredibly deep wide receiver draft might match with them hiring Kingsbury, as his air raid system may be easier for rookie wide receiver draft picks to learn easily and get them up and running. Thoughts? So my thought is this is a good thought, but the cart is before the horse. I don't think that you look at the draft and go, deep wide receiver class, let's hire Cliff Kingsbury. I do think that the deep wide receiver class can be helpful to Cliff Kingsbury. I think this team needs a big X receiver. I think Terry goes to Z. I think that Jahan then goes in the slot. I think you could, with Cliff and the way he gets matchups in space, keep running with Terry at the X, Jahan at the Z, and go from there. But there is definitely any kind of receiver you want in this draft, and they definitely need to add because De'Ami Brown and Mitchell Tinsley are the only two non-Terry and Jahan wide receivers currently on the roster. And if you're going to go 4 wide with any frequency, which we'll see if Cliff does that here, if that's still a priority, the 10 personnel stuff, then you need that. But I think it is going to be a very interesting first offseason here. And the markets in some of the positions that they need help in are very strong. There's some others where there's not. It's a weird draft in a lot of ways. But I don't think that you look at the draft class and go, great wide receiver class, bring in Cliff. I think that is bass backwards, as they say. Pedro Ramirez 7412 says, Cowboys fan here. Quinn is a good football coach. He always kept his defense coach to a good level, although he did pick up a locker room in Dallas that was already built and the leaders were already there. If he can build that in Washington, y'all will be 8 to 9 wins easily. Obviously, every year, y'all hope for more, but it will be floor 8 to 9 wins with a chance to be a playoff contender every year, which is what we all hope from our teams. I think to an extent, where Washington is right now, it feels more boom or bust. Like, hey, we've done the 8-8 thing. Can we be really good or really bad, and then that way eventually we're really good? But I do think Quinn gives you a level of competency that is going to be good. But I think at the end of the day, like, it's a players' league in so many ways. Like, your coach is what takes you from having good players and being like a mid-level football team to being a competitor. I do think the coaching matters a ton as a needle mover, but the floor of your team is based off your talent. And unfortunately, and how you use it. So I guess that is coaching. But the bottom line is last year, like, this team wasn't as talented as we thought in some spaces, wasn't used well in others, and then got worse as the year went due to injuries and trades. And that's why they're picking second in the draft naturally. Last two here. Curtis Walker, 3654, says, do you think Cliff Kingsbury will elect to bring in an experienced run game coordinator to help marry his scheme to a more balanced offense? I actually don't know how much more balanced Cliff needs to be. I do think it needs to make sure that it marries pass and run. And I would say if there's an experienced run game coordinator that works well within what Cliff wants to do, a lot of gap scheme type of stuff, that they're comfortable with a run game that's out of shotgun a lot, then yeah, you should bring it in. But I think one of the things we saw last year, and I will say like to an extent last year in Washington, but more so in Carolina is the best example of this in recent memory. Just a bunch of good coaches in a room doesn't mean jack squat. A bunch of good coaches that all think the same, like think similarly on a principle level, think similarly and understand what each other is trying to accomplish, even if they have disagreements that they flush out in a productive way. That's how you create a good staff. So experience could wind up being a bad thing. Like, I look at the friction that existed between Bill Callahan and Kevin O'Connell here, and they just saw the game differently. So, experience can be overrated because then, a guy doesn't necessarily respect his rank. He's like, oh, I'm being brought in to help. I know better than Cliff does. And if you have a guy that comes in like that, that's a bad idea. But obviously someone with some kind of experience would be great as long as they're on the same page as Cliff. Last but not least, our fun comments of the week. I'm just going to pick one of the many that we're saying this. Steve C2665 commented on one of our videos from Monday when we were in Ashburn and said, will you guys stop showing off all the books you've read because I was sitting in front of an empty bookshelf. I would just like everyone to know that was not my office. That was not anybody's office. That's why the bookshelves are empty. That's why I could use it. So I do think that it would be smart, though, next time we do the radio show from Ashburn, because there's a press conference or a practice or whatever that we're covering, and thankfully the Commanders have been great in letting us, when there is news, be out there and do the show from Ashburn. But as the only show that does video, I'm going to demand a couple of helmets. I think that's what I'm going to do. I need either books or helmets to put behind me. We can't do the empty bookshelf. There was a lot of concern. I do read books. I know stuff about things in the world. It's the Hoffman Show. We are live on Radio Row in Las Vegas. Super Bowl week 2024. Super Bowl 58 Sunday. You can hear it right here on the Team 980. When we get back, veteran journalist, Around the Horn panelist, Washington Post columnist Kevin Blackistone joins us here on the Team 980. right, we are back live on Radio Row. Final hour of the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Always live as well on the free Odyssey app, where I am ready to murder Anthony back in D.C. because he played the dog pooping hour open as we have an esteemed journalist on the set. That is the laugh of Kevin Blackistone. You watch him on Around the Horn. You read him in the Washington Post. Or maybe you take his class at University of Maryland.
Yeah, how about that? Some people do.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're D.C. Station, as you know where you are right now.
Absolutely.
So maybe some of your students are out there listening. We got one here that's listening on Radio Row. We got Torrance here.
Exactly.
But maybe
Torrance
someone's out there driving around.
I should have made that extra credit. You know.
Yeah.
I had some of them covering the Go-Go
Kevin,
game
we'll
last
take,
night. So there you go.
We'll take the listeners however we can get them. If it's extra credit in Blackistone's class, Professor Blackistone's class, then so be it. So I would like to get some sports takes, if you will, out of you. I will rally you in a moment. But I do want to start with the reason that you're kind of here today. You're talking about a study that you and your students did about youth football in America. Tell me more about this study and what you guys found.
Sure, I'll kick it over to Torrance, but they wanted to look at.
We're on
okay.
mics, Torrance. He's listening.
All right, he's on. Yeah, good. All right. So you all are familiar with, your listeners are familiar with the data that has suggested that participation in youth football has been decline, in a bit of decline. So the students wanted to look at the numbers inside of those numbers. And what they found that was particularly interesting, maybe unnerving, is that while that is true, that is not true when you look at the households of black and brown families. That in those households, participation rates are actually going up slightly. And so the question was why? And through polling and reporting, they found out that black and brown parents see the reward of a potential college scholarship and the lottery ticket of an NFL contract as worth the risk of, or is worth the reward of risking having their kids play tackle football at a very, very young age, between the ages of 5 and 9, while other households are kind of maneuvering away from that. So that was the real takeaway from what they did. And they broke it down into 6 stories and a video package, traveled around the South and through and out to Fort Washington, Maryland, to really put some blood and flesh on the bones of the data that they found.
So that leads to, I mean, I could honestly talk to you guys about this for an hour, and perhaps when we get back to D.C., Torrance, I'll come out and we can chat about this in a podcast setting where we have the time to do that. But I think there's 2 big things that jump out to me. The healthcare disparities in black and brown communities are very well documented, and I could see that being obviously an issue on the back end if there is some kind of injury. But how much do you think that plays on the front end, where the advice they're getting or the data that families are getting in what is statistically inferior healthcare could be influencing those decisions on the front end?
Wow, that's an interesting question. Hadn't thought about it that way, but I would say, just looking at the polling data, that may not even be considered. I don't think that people are thinking necessarily that broad about this issue. From everything the students found out, it's a very myopic view of
very
what
economically
football,
driven.
Right, that football can do for them. You know, I mean, you know the stories. We write them in the media, you broadcast them on radio and TV. These feel-good stories about a football scholarship benefiting a certain kid in a certain family by making him the first in his family's history to go to college, right? And he's doing so on a college degree. And so I think that's what people think about. And with the expense of college these days, the competition in sports, particularly at the youth level, where parents think that they can develop their kid into a scholarship earning talent, is greater than it's ever been. So I think that's the calculus. I don't think the study revealed anything anything more than that. But I tell you what is disturbing to me about it. There are a lot of things, but one of the things is that a few years ago, and I don't know if you've ever come to the Povich Symposium at the University of Maryland, we do once a year in November, but one year there was a discussion about football and what was going on in football and CTE. And Bob Costas was on the panel, and Bob Costas said that CTE was an existential threat to football.
Mm-hmm. I remember that. I remember,
you remember
that.
Yeah. And it caused a lot of consternation with the league.
And at the time, just for people that don't remember it, like Bob Costas was still doing Sunday Night Football pre and post on NBC.
Exactly.
And so you have the league's face of the big league, the league's biggest partner, going, "Hey, this is a red flag, red flag, red flag."
You're exactly right, and it cost him. But so then I juxtaposed that moment to this study, and this study suggests that if that's true, the remedy is that black kids and Hispanic kids are the remedy to this, because they and their parents or guardians are disregarding the risk factor because the reward seems so tremendous.
So the study, Kevin Blackistone, Professor Kevin Blackistone, very specifically with us here on the Hoffman Show. You specifically said the study is ages 5 through 9, and I feel like a lot of football in that age group has switched to flag, and there is a lot, obviously, to be gained. I mean, I think, obviously, everyone would agree, like, there's so much to gain from playing team sports and
exactly.
All that kind of stuff, and people go like, all right, well, flag football is a way that we can still accomplish so many of those things, even if they don't have to crash their little heads into each other. Have you seen a shift in that, or was there any anecdotal data about a shift in black and brown communities to flag football, or do you think, and could that be kind of a next step? And what, I guess really this might be the hour version of the podcast, right, is like, what are the forces that need to happen to push it in that safer direction while still leaving the door of opportunity open?
Well, you know what? For the second year in a row, the Pro Bowl was flag football.
Yeah.
And why was the Pro Bowl turned into a flag football event? Because
then Sean Taylor can't lay out a punter.
Well, that too. But because of injury.
Right.
Right? So they wanted to take the injury equation out by playing flag football. And I think that can be a remedy. There can be a number of remedies, but the bottom line to that is what you're suggesting is what needs to be done is that some guardrails need to put up around youth football. And no one's going to, the parents aren't necessarily going to do it. Certainly the kids aren't going to do it. They just want to emulate the people that they see on Sunday.
Right.
So if not them, then who? State legislatures need to get involved. Youth football organizers maybe need to get involved. The NFL does have their flag football program, and a lot of ex-players are in it, and they're promoting that, and I think that's a good thing. But there probably need to be, and people hate rules and regulations, but there probably need to be more rules and regulations. Just a few days ago, JAMA, the Journal for the American Medical Association, turned out a new study which showed that adolescent tackle football players suffer brain injury.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's enough.
Seems to be a significant data point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you may want to we may want to pay attention to that. I don't know if you have kids or not.
Not yet.
And at some point, you have to figure that out. I have a daughter who has no interest in playing tackle football or football, period. So that's not a decision that I had to make. But, I grew up in the D.C. area, playing in the Green Meadows Boys and Girls Club, 65-pound football, then 75-pound, then 85-pound, and
right.
the next thing you know, you're in high school playing football. And of course, none of this was a consideration, but it should be now.
For sure. All right, I'm going to have you take your professor hat off for a second, and I'm going to have you put your Around the Horn panelist hat on, in part also because we are a little short on time, and I do want to get this into you. So the nice tight TV answer here.
Lightning answer.
The new Commanders administration, Adam Peters at GM, Dan Quinn as head coach. What do you think?
My goodness, I love it. But then again, Mickey Mouse could have come in and probably put together a more favorable operation than we had before. But no, I really do. I love the hire of Adam Peters. In fact, I got a couple texts from cats in the league. As soon as they hired, they were like, "This is a great move."
Yeah.
So I love that. I was surprised by Dan Quinn hiring, but after talking to some people who've been paying very, very close attention to it and talking to people around the league, it's a good move. I'm excited about. Well, Joe Witt is a no-brainer, and there are there's suggestion out there from people I know back in Dallas that Joe Witt wasn't going to become a DC, and that made him very available when Dan Quinn got hired. And I'm not down on Cliff Kingsbury. I know a lot of people are, but his offenses are fun, and you're going to have a new quarterback. You better have a new quarterback.
Right.
And this is one of the things that he's proven he can do. He develops quarterbacks, young quarterbacks. So finally, the ship seems to have been turned around and headed in the right direction after being listless, if not sinking at sea, for well over a decade.
Yeah.
So as someone who grew up in Washington, D.C., as someone who grew up in a family that had season tickets since before I was even born, who lost all of his enthusiasm for this team under the previous ownership, and I know I'm not alone, I am ecstatic about the direction that they appear to be headed.
Well, hopefully we can get a chance to talk about it more. Let's get the three of us and maybe Torrance, some of your classmates. People watching on YouTube are like, "Is Torrance over there?" Yeah, Torrance is on the
right
other
over
side
there,
of the camera. So I'm
seriously.
looking up over the camera. Let's get together in DC
Let's do
when
it.
we all get back and have a deeper discussion on this. This was great.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
It's Kevin Blackistone, everybody. I believe Dave Johnson's joining us ahead of the Wizards game next.
Oh, nice.
All right, we're live on Radio Row, Las Vegas, Nevada, where it rained yesterday. Very bizarre. But we are live on Radio Row. What a day it has been. Day one for us out here ahead of the Super Bowl 58 Sunday here on the Team 980. Tonight on the Team 980, though, it is Wizards and Cavs, which means it's time for us to welcome in Dave Johnson.
Time to get the radio party started.
Blocked by Malone, pull it by White. Oh boy, did he stuff him. Left wing pull, it's there. Oh, that's a pool party. Near the basket, slam right there. Oh, they're stealing the slam. You better go off. Intercepted by Kispert. Kispert now, foul line. Oh, slam. Ooh, that'll jar your preserves.
It's time for Dave Johnson on a Wizards game day.
Kuzma for three. Oh, it's there. It's there. Big shot.
On the Hoffman Show.
As Jerry Rice walks by behind us, it is time to welcome Dave in. Dave, anybody, is Glenn walking by? Like, I got Jerry Rice. Yeah. Who do you got?
Game, set, match, Craig Hoffman. I don't know what am I doing on your show? I mean, you just had Kevin Blackistone on, which, by the way, is a great segment. And
he's
got all
great.
These people coming on. It reminds me, I was asked to speak at a club dinner, and like, the month after was Tim Kirchin, and I think the month before was Len Elmore. I mean, it's just like, all right, wait a minute. You were so desperate. You called me. We got to fill September somehow. So, and I'm ill prepared. I'm not even bringing you gifts because you're in Las Vegas. I've already done hats and bobbleheads, and so I feel I'm grateful that you're still talking to me after. The stars started lineup, but nothing.
Please, Dave, come on.
No.
We need the Dave Johnson self-esteem to get up here. You're a legend, sir. You respect Dave. Dave, do you hear me? I want you to respect Dave.
Right. Well, let me tell you something. Last night, you talk about when somebody says you're a legend, that means you're old. That's some way of saying it. And it reminded me last night. I was hosting a dinner, and it was a great dinner with Will Dawkins. But we were also celebrating and this was the point of the dinner, our 30-year season ticket holders and who've been with us for 30 years consecutively.
Wow.
And it was just a great night. But one of the ticket people said, "Wow, 30 years, that's as old as I am." I'm like, "Oh, great. That makes me feel like I should go home and take a nap now because 30 years is half as old as I am." So, but the takeaway is I try to bring this conversation back to something that should be a takeaway. Will Dawkins had 4 phones on him because the trade deadline is coming up, and I'm not kidding about that. And he was talking to the 30-year supporters that it's important not to cheat the process, and that's hard, and that's where we are right now as a team. That it's not easy when you're 9 and 40, I guess, right? I don't even look anymore because it's not about the record. It is about the individual progress we're seeing. It is about how we finish the end of the season, and Will Dawkins is very confident, and so is Michael Winger, and what they do because they've done it before, and they believe it's going to happen to the Wizards. And I thought he made a great statement last night to the fans. Somebody asked, where do you hope we are in 4 or 5 years? Look, you can't predict, or 3 or 4 years, whatever the question was, but he says he hopes that when the draft comes up, people start saying, well, that's a Wizards player. Well, that's a Wizards player. The point being that there's an identity created here with the Wizards. In other words, we do it now with some teams. I'm not talking about the specific player you draft, just the type of player.
Right,
and
right.
We say it all the time that, well, that player would be great in San Antonio because of San Antonio's identity and culture. And that's the point of this journey. It's just that we are, and this is why it was so special to be with people that have been with us for 30 years and continue to be with us because they understand what's going on, and they understand you can't cheat the process. And point being, in other words, if we get into 3 months next season, I don't think we're going to be playoff contending team, but that doesn't mean right away you do everything to become a playoff contending team, because that's not the trajectory you're on. We're not on a 10-year plan either. I don't want to.
Right.
There's but again, and that's a delicate balance, as Will was talking about it. You don't cheat what you define as the process.
Yeah. Now, this probably is not the most pertinent question off of that very important and I think insightful story you just gave us, Dave. But if I'm an opposing general manager in the league and Will's got 4 phones, how do I know which one to call?
Right. Well, I think that's a good question. I guess maybe he gave out different. I am not kidding about that 4 cell phone story.
Oh, I don't doubt it.
So it not a joke. I think maybe it's just if you're Will Dawkins or anybody who's an NBA general manager, if the deal of the century is coming, you don't want it.
Can't be dead. Phone can't be dead. You got to have backups.
Or you have to, or you don't want the conversation to start with, at the tone, please leave your message.
Yes. No.
That's not the way the deal of the century starts. But,
we'll have to have him on the show. We're hoping to have either he or Michael on later this week, which is kind of our annual tradition here. All 2 years of the show, we've been able to get the general manager after the trade deadline. So if we do that, I'm going to pocket that. Anthony, please write that down. I need to ask how they knew which phone to call. Or if we get Michael, does he also have 4 phones? All right. Sunday was really... first, it started as a great day, if I'm being honest, Dave. Like, the tribute that the Wizards did for Brad was A+. The crowd gave a nice reception. And then he repaid this organization by having the best game he's had in Capital One Arena in quite some time. Dave, what was that from Bradley Beal? And did you find yourself almost conflicted during it as someone who has covered so much of Brad's career?
Well, I was happy I'm happy to see him healthy and doing well. And because, we became friends. I don't mean like, I'm stopping over to this house and hanging out friends, but it was, it was great to work with him. Working friendship, I should put it out there. So I'm happy to see him healthy because he is a talent. He's somebody who works very hard, and it was and again, it started in Phoenix, as you know, not healthy, and you're thinking, oh gosh, he's really not going to catch a break. But I'm happy for him. Look, the reality is, especially, we were down Kuzma, we were down Bagley, et cetera, and then they've got Booker, Durant, and Bradley. So somebody was probably going to score 40. I hate to put it that way, but and they, this is where I'm not saying that it's easier. Well, it is easier on Phoenix. For Bradley Beal. Because, Yeah. I mean, who are you going to cover or how are you going to do it or et cetera, et cetera. And that's why I used to say we need to celebrate what he's doing, and that's why when he was not an all-star, because we were losing, I understand that theory. Wow, we're not not a winning team, so why should he be an all-star? Well, look what he's putting up when he's option 1, 2, and 3 on the opponent's scouting report, or certainly options 1 and 2. So just very happy for him because, look, we had some special times here, and it's, specifically that when we're about to get the Eastern Conference and you're thinking, all right, we come back next year and everybody stays healthy. Look, health is always a big part of any run. I tell people, Oklahoma City's flying now, but last year when their top draft pick, Chet Holmgren's not playing at all. Do you think people were anxious? Yes, I remember being in Oklahoma City. They're thinking, wow, did we draft the wrong guy, et cetera. So that's part of being, a fan, and specifically of the NBA, that there's anxiety, or what are Knicks fans going with Julius Randle all of a sudden goes down. So I'm happy for Brad, and we played the Wizards. The Wizards played the Suns. It was almost pulled off an upset in Phoenix, but on that night, Devin Booker had a particularly off night until the fourth quarter when the Suns were able to win by 4 points, and Bradley didn't play. So you just at least were down to just by the way, Durant and Booker to deal with, which is not like saying, oh, wow, we get a free pass tonight.
It's not playing you and me, that's for sure.
Right, no. So but I'm happy. I'm happy for him. And look, the tough stretch, but every night's a tough stretch. I mean, Cleveland's the hottest team in the NBA right now. They've won 14 of 15, and the stat that jumps out at me at that is that's a franchise record, and LeBron James has nothing to do with it. They were never 14-1. With LeBron James, or won 14 of 15 games. So it's impressive what they're doing. And again, when teams like Cleveland or Orlando, whoever comes in, yes, you can turn it around and get moving in the right direction with the right moves, with the right draft picks. And that's what Cleveland's done as well.
Dave's got the pregame coming up in, I can't do math anymore, Dave. It's soon. It's 18 minutes. There we go. Yep. 18 minutes. Dave's got the pregame show here on the team at 980 Wiz and Cavs tonight. Dave, always appreciate your time, sir. We will talk to you later in the week, and have a great call.
Hey, listen, keep doing the great stuff, and I'll be listening, and I look forward to talking to you next time.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, sir. That is Dave Johnson with us live at the broadcast booth at Capital One Arena. We are live on Radio Row, wrapping up day one of our Super Bowl 58 coverage next. All right, we are wrapping up from Radio Row in Las Vegas on the Hoffman Show. Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980, where if you're watching, you see Grant Paulson taking a seat next to me. He's been next to me the whole time. He was just over there because they literally got us like one space, and then it comes with two tables, so we just split it.
About 3 feet apart.
Yeah.
But we make it work. We're a big, happy family.
Hold on one second before we say that. Is that Antonio Gibson and De'Ami Brown that just walked in?
Yes, actually. It looks that way.
It does. I wonder what they're doing here. I think we should probably go find out at some point.
That seems like something that I need to be doing for us, yes.
So if you want to go chase them down, you can. We were going to have a fun little recap of our days, but
yes.
Someone should probably go see what two people one of whom is still under contract is going to do. So if you want to go do that.
One of whom is a free agent.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to text where's our guy?
Here's your
I'll get
phone.
a guy on it.
How we can get a guy on it. I was like, I think that was De'Ami. That's AG. That's kind of what Radio Row is. Did you have any wacky, just someone joins you on the spur of the moment interviews today? We had Justin Pugh that way. I think he was supposed to actually be with you.
Right.
And then you had Lombardi, who we had also had.
Yeah.
And then so I wound up with Pugh. But that's actually, I feel like that's appropriate, Grant, because Justin Pugh and I were classmates at Syracuse.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Pugh's a great guy, by the way.
Yeah.
I covered him at the Senior Bowl when he was coming out from Syracuse. His agent's actually a local guy in the Virginia area who's been representing NFL players for many years, went to Virginia Tech. But Pugh's just an awesome dude. He had his viral moment, to get off straight off the couch.
Right.
And now he's here representing based on that.
Yes.
Which is really, really cool. But, no, it's been a fun day. We had a great show, man. Dan Orlovsky's awesome.
Yeah, Dan's great.
He's hard to get on the air, but today we got him, which was really cool. And you know who I really enjoyed? We talked about the college quarterback prospects with Danny Cannell.
Yep.
Right now, having the number 2 overall pick for Washington, my intrigue and fascination and kind of my obsession is studying these quarterback prospects. And for me, you can watch the games, whatever. I'm not a scout. So I just like talking to people who have studied them. And he just got done doing a pretty deep dive, so that was cool.
Which was there one that he liked more than the others?
He really likes Drake May.
Interesting.
We had 3 college or quarterback type analysts on today. All 3 of their top guy was a different guy.
Orlovsky
believe it or not. Orlovsky is a Caleb Williams guy.
Yeah.
And then we had a third analyst today who said Jaden Daniels over Caleb Williams, which I found really interesting.
I think that is going to be a take that takes off in the next couple of weeks because, Caleb's 23 tape is not great. It's still real. All the stuff that makes him, right, is all there on the tape. Right. Again, I'm also not a scout, but I watch and I know a little bit, as of you, as someone who's been on the beat and known so many good, coaches over the years that Grant and I have been lucky enough to talk to and learn from. So, it's not like we don't know nothing when we watch. And you see the stuff from Caleb where he just runs around and makes plays, and you're like, there aren't 5 guys in the league that can do that.
Right.
It seems worth drafting.
Don't you think he is going to be a really hard grade?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, I will watch his games, just watching them back, watching what's available. And when he's out of structure, off schedule, there's a lot of no, yes stuff.
Yes.
But, I mean, there just aren't people on the planet that can do it. And that's the whole point. Everyone, throws Mahomes out there. Well, it's because no one else can really do some of the stuff that he can do. But here is my shortcoming maybe. My proclivity is I really like guys who are on schedule a lot. I'm old school in that way. And you don't need to major in that, but you need to be able to do it at a high level. And that's going to be the big question for me with Caleb Williams. The more I watch Jaden Daniels, the more I really like him in that way.
Same.
I just don't know. My 2 issues with him are size. I'm petrified about his length, which is fine, but it's the width part,
Right.
He's so long that he is not sturdy. Did you see Cam Newton here today?
No, but I've seen Cam in person before.
He is an unbelievably big guy.
Yes.
Justin Fields is not a particularly tall guy that's takes you back,
but he's
very thick. The Daniels body to me is a lot more almost like a Robert Griffin, but taller, almost stretched out.
He's a little thicker than RG was, but not much.
It's similar to me.
I will tell you my first ever seeing Cam Newton's story live, because I grew up in the Carolinas. My family had season tickets, and our tickets were up there. I think it was section 535 at
They do the 500 bit there. I've had those seats.
Yeah, it's not bad. But I remember realizing from the 500s that dude was big, and also I didn't realize just how strong his arm was because he's throwing in warm-ups, and I just hear a thump, and I'm like, what was that? And he throws another pass, and I realize I'm in the 500s, and I'm hearing the thump of the ball hitting the receiver's chest plate.
Yeah, I believe that.
That is how big and strong that dude is. And then when I was covering Washington, going to Carolina and being 5 feet away from Cam Newton, you realize that is a different dude.
It's just a whole, and the reason I bring him up is to say that is a dual threat type quarterback who took a licking, and I think he never got calls he deserved. By the way, part of it was because of how
Shaq theory going on.
Exactly how big he was, and it's just I'm not going to defend that guy. I should defend the guy that he just ran into.
Right.
But I worry about the size with Jaden Daniels, and I shouldn't do this, but I'm starting now the last couple years with guys that haven't succeeded, Mac Jones among them, to if you have a ton of talent around you in college, I don't want to penalize you, but it just makes me think more. And those 2 LSU wide receivers, both of them were going to go in the first round.
Yep.
Both of them were outstanding. Statistically, this is a number that PFF dropped the other day. There was nobody in college football who threw to more open receivers 20-plus yards downfield than Jaden Daniels. So there's something to be said for a lot of those big-time highlight throws, which are beautiful, are to open receivers. it's not to say he can't be great. So those are just my worries about him.
I think the hard part when you talk about it being a hard scout is like, do you reward him for putting those balls on the money because he does with consistency, or do you be like, well, any quarterback can make that throw? And I think what you see in the league, though, I will say this, like for where I sit on it is I reward making the throw. Because how often do we see big plays, which we know are so critically important to winning games, get thrown by the wayside because a quarterback misses something that he shouldn't?
And what's the opposite of, like, if I'm going to take away because the guy was open, what's the opposite? Well, it's Drake May, where it's like guys aren't often open or the offense isn't very
throw
good.
Guys open.
And guess what? I don't feel better about him for that. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, so if I'm going to ding Jaden Daniels, it's not like I'm putting a check mark with Drake May. So I don't know. It is a decision that I would both love to and hate to make, right? Yeah. Because sitting 2 in this class, I don't think they're going to move up. It is certainly possible.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
I don't think they should, but they could. But sitting 2, I think, is an unbelievable possibility for Adam Peters because you've got a little bit of everything. As I like to say to Danny, the store is called Quarterbackville. It's like Food Lion and a Giant. It's quarterback store. And then there's different aisles. Right. Jaden Daniels is on the same aisle as like a Lamar or whatever. The aisle I would typically shop on is the Drake May aisle. But, man, am I tempted to go, scan a bag of the Jaden Daniels. I really might snag one of those and throw it in the cart. But it was just fascinating. It was so funny today. I would not have thought of this. But 3 different guys, including Bryan Jones was the other one of CBS, and all 3 of their number 1 guy was different. And I kind of thought the consensus for everyone was going to be Caleb Williams. And that wasn't the case so far today, for what it's worth.
Yeah, Robert Mays started the show with us from The Athletic. His boy Nate Tice is big on May. Talking to different people, you
Nate's
get all kinds of different
too.
stuff. Yeah, for sure. I think the one thing that I take out of the various interviews today, I mean, we had DQ today, so that was obviously our big thing. If you missed the interview with Dan Quinn, check out the Hoffman Show podcast. You can catch it there. But I think outside of that, the biggest takeaway for me today is I continue to feel better about Cliff. Like, the more people I talk to, the more are just like, that dude's really smart. Like, it's smart in the ways that it matters in this league. And it's not just, everyone wants to be like, hey, he's just a pretty face and he wows people in the interviews. People get lost in his eyes and his hair. And it's like, no, that dude's a grinder. Like, there is something to that I do wonder if he maybe lacks some of the people skills or has yet to apply the people skills to be the successful head coach. But as a coordinator, I think the stuff that he's good at can work. I still have questions, and we're not going to get answers till the fall. But, like, the more people I talk to, the better I feel about Cliff.
Did you watch Hard Knocks with the Cardinals?
Yes, I did.
I did, too. I came away really liking Cliff Kingsbury.
Same, and I didn't want to.
I didn't really go in with any kind of proclivity, but, like, I went in being skeptical of him because I just don't think the results have been there. I really liked him. I kind of think he's introverted. I'd have to talk to him, but, like, he is very quiet. He is very soft-spoken. He does not in any way – Kyle Shanahan has some of these traits, having covered him. Yeah. But, like, he does not come off as a McVay. Like, I don't think Cliff Kingsbury, while he is, to your point, like, a good-looking guy who you're like, who's that guy? He is not going to walk into Radio Row and just, like, take the room over or kill in just this setting where you're going table to table.
Right.
Whereas Sean McVay, by the end of the interview, you're like, oh, I want to have a beer with this guy tonight.
Right.
I don't think he has that kind of quality. But I loved him in Hard Knocks because when he's around guys, they bond over ball. Like, that is a X and O robot. I am whelmed. I'm not, like, thrilled about the hire. I'm certainly not disappointed. I'm really curious about the rest of his staff.
Same.
I want to know who's your O-line coach? Who's your quarterback's coach? Are you layering this thing with really sharp young people? Those are the things for me that are going to, like, everyone keeps wanting this hard opinion. I just don't have it yet.
Yeah.
I'm
Which
fine.
is, by the way, how I feel about DQ in a lot of ways. How I feel about basically this entire operation outside of Adam Peters.
It's a lot of incompletes, right? It's new.
For sure. We have 65 seconds left in the show. Radio, hard outs, you know the deal.
Look at all your fancy camera stuff.
Yeah, I know. We try to do as much as we can over here with whatever they give us, which is, well, I'm not going to get fired in the final 65 seconds.
How much do they give you?
Show.
Tell us more.
Nope. They give me the ability to submit the things to sit here, and that's what we're asking for.
Good.
I would say the quote of the show for me actually came from DQ about Cliff. He said he's a rare competitor, and that I was like, ooh, I like that. So circle back on that another time. In the final 35 seconds of the show, who do you got tomorrow?
I'm excited. We're talking to Tony Khan tomorrow, which is really cool.
Interesting.
Runs AEW and super analytically driven. He's behind True Media, so I'm a really big fan of his work analytically. Also, Will Compton. I caught up with him today. We're going to play the interview tomorrow. Told a lot of great stories about his time in Washington, so that's really fun. It's going to be a good show.
Yeah, it should be a fun time tomorrow. So if you're driving around, flip between the two stations. Of course, we love to, as much as we can here on the Team 980 GP over on The Fan. Signing off Day 1 Radio Row. Wizards basketball is next.